I'm Debbie Kamansky, and I'm the Executive Director of the Alban Pelagic Museum and Sculpture Gardens. I am a native Winter Parker. I was born and grew up here. I've been roaming around these grounds my entire life, and I came on board almost 10 years ago in my current position.
My name is Chris Madrid French, and I am the Project Director for Preservation Capen, and I've been working with Debbie for a few months to execute the move of the Capen Showalter House across Lake Osceola.
In June, just barely over 70 days ago, I was contacted by Betsy Owen over at Casa Feliz, and Betsy wanted to explore the opportunity to perhaps bring the Capen House over here to the museum grounds. We have 3 acres on Lake Osceola, and we're already on the National Register of Historic Places, and it seemed like a very nice fit. And we've been pursuing that at about 100 miles an hour every single moment ever since.
What was revealed when Betsy came to Debbie is that it actually fit within the future vision plan for the Pelagic Museum as set forth by the Board of Trustees.
That's right.
To expand the capabilities of the museum here, and also to ensure its commercial viability into the future, its own financial viability, into the future.
The discussion with the Begornies was primarily what the budget needed to be in order to execute the plan. And during the month of June, later part of June and July, a number of bids were offered. There was a lot of research into what the cost would be and what the timeline needed to be. The Begornies had been very cooperative in allowing us access to the house and any information that we needed. The main stipulation by the parties that we are fully intended to try and honor is the timeline. And the house must be off their property by December 31st. And that is a non-negotiable item in the agreement. And we are approaching the fundraising aspect in really looking at 2 phases. Phase 1 is the actual move, and then phase 2 would be the restoration of the house and bringing it to the point where we can actually open the doors and have people in. The entire budget is in the neighborhood of $650,000. We have broken it out into the moving budget. We must reach $400,000, and we need to do it by the 2nd or 3rd week in October. $400,000 is the cost to take it apart, put it on the barges, bring it over, and set it into our east garden.
Renovation begins.
The renovation would be in the neighborhood of $250,000. Right now, we're at $202,000 and some odd dollars to date. And basically now it's the full court press. We have to reach that next 200 in the next 6-7 weeks. Well, it's so far, the match was from the Galloway Foundation. And they said when we reached the first $100,000, they would match it with another $100,000. And we reached the 100 by private donors in our community who have come forward with anything from a $50 to $1,000 to a $25,000 donation. Yes, the first large donation came from John and Ann Polisek. And Ann has served for many years on our board. She is an emeritus trustee and never misses anything. And over the years, the Poliseks have been wonderful donors to the museum and to the spirit of the museum. Many people that come here all know Anne, all 4'10" of her.
She's adorable.
She and well, two of the happiest people on the face of the earth.
Right, and she came forward during our one of our first events at Casa Feliz, and then actually issued a challenge for other community members to come forward and donate as well.
Have you had the structure itself appraised?
Yes.
What is the appraisal amount?
Well, we have been told somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000.
I see. So 600,000 would be the low end of the appraisal.
That's what I've been told.
And it's my understanding that since you are a nonprofit organization, that when and if you reach the donations you need to move the home, once that happens and the home is placed on your property, that home becomes a donation by the Picorni family
That's correct.
to your organization. Correct?
Yes.
And as such, that donation would then become tax deductible by the Picornis. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Very good.
We are a 501c3. It is up to the Pigornis to secure an independent appraisal in order to file for that deduction. We do not do that. They have to establish the price through independent appraisals.
You've mentioned that the Capen house, once you have it in place, will be added to the Winter Park Historic Registry.
Yes, that's our intent.
Very good. I think you've also indicated, I think you said earlier in the interview, that your grounds and your property here are part of the National Historic Registry.
That's correct.
Is that correct? And is there a question as to, well, I assume that you are going to look closely at adding the Capen house to the National Registry in addition to the Winter Park Registry. And I believe you have background with the National
Right,
Registry, don't you?
I can speak to that for that particular question. This site where we are sitting, the Palacic House and Museum, is on the National Register of Historic Places. The site where the Capen House is being moved to was not part of that original nomination. So it doesn't affect at all the registration of this property. The Capen House will have to be, would have to age a bit on the property before it could be nominated for National Register status. Because it's moved, it would have lost that original context, historic context. So it'd have to be, have to sit for a little bit before the National Register would accept it as a property, but I don't believe that same restriction applies to the Winter Park historical
No, it doesn't.
listing. So that we could still get local listing, which would actually protect the house in a stronger manner than National Register listing would. A National Register listing is mostly more of an honorary significance, unless there are federal funds used for any kind of demolition or changes.
As far as the donations that you've received so far, I get the sense that most of your donors have been private individuals.
All of them.
All of them have so far. And you and I talked in our last interview about outreach to organizations, foundations, and corporations. And I'm wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about your plan along those lines and any indications or promises that you might have received.
Well, Chris has been working on helping identify those prospects. That is ongoing efforts right now, and at this time, we do not have firm commitments. We have a wonderful volunteer team helping us, and that's what we were meeting about this morning, and continuing to push forward with our efforts to reach out to our local business community as well as local foundations. We're finding many of them have committed their funds for 2013, and so it is a challenge right now.
No, I have not approached SunTrust yet. No.
We have had some discussions with SunTrust, and that is a work in progress.
I understand.
There are corporate opportunities, though, and one of the probably the most appealing opportunity would be to advertise on the barge as it carries the house across Lake Osceola, and to be able to put a banner. And I believe CNN has already committed
Yes.
to coverage of this house move, so it would be national advertising. As the house is going across, to see your name, in lights there would be, I think, a really appealing prospect for a corporation. Right, the community response has been extremely favorable and very much in support of saving the house. There is the controversy, of course, that we're not keeping the house on the same site, but that point is we're far beyond that point. There's no way that the house can be saved on its current site. The only way to save this original 1885 material and history of the house is to move it to the other location. And I think when the community sees that, understands that they have to act or we'll lose the house permanently. If it's demolished, it's gone forever and ever. It can never be replaced. You can never rebuild an 1885 house with original material. So it's very, very important that we do this. The other question that comes up is, well, how are you going to save every historic house in Winter Park by scooching it across the road, like Casa Feliz was saved, like the Capen house will be saved? And of course not. That's obviously not a long-term preservation solution for Winter Park. But that is another question that has to be addressed by other people in the community as well. So that is maybe a step 2, a step 3. Primary right now is to get through this one process and then investigate how we can keep this from happening again.
Yes, in a way, this is truly a landmark effort in Winter Park when 3 of the most historic organizations, Casa Feliz has become one in fairly recent years because of the success of their project. But for all of us to be bound together, working together, the Winter Park Historical Association, the Friends of Casa Feliz have been intimately involved, and their board leadership has been involved and continues to help reach out and make this a success. And that's extraordinary when you take 3 nonprofits and we're all working for a common goal.
Right, and what it's showing is that there is economic potential in saving the history of Winter Park. I don't know if everyone in the community understands that people come to Winter Park to experience this smaller town, the atmosphere that we have here, which is in large part due to the buildings that we have. If we start losing the buildings here, that erodes and it doesn't have that special quality that it has right now, the sparkly, beautiful quality of Winter Park that we love. And I heard in Beth Kassab's article yesterday that since the Capen House demolition was approved by the city, that 18 more houses have been approved for demolition since that time. And are those houses historic? Do we know when they were built? There's no information whatsoever. But this is the type of thing, if we, in the future, and I mean we as a community, if we can look at this in the larger perspective, there are ways that you can respect private property rights, yet still ensure that the city maintains its historic character. It's been done in bigger places that have higher economic pressures, so it can be done.
If memory serves, it's my sense that, especially considering the fact that Capen House was, in essence, updated with early century 1920s, 1930s aesthetics, that in some ways that's fairly connected to a lot of the fine old homes in an old city connected to Los Angeles, Pasadena.
Oh.
I don't know if I'm correct about that, but one way or the other, could you, if you're familiar with it, could you describe how preservation efforts may have changed Pasadena compared to what might have been if those efforts hadn't been undertaken?
Right. Pasadena's history, essentially it's a suburb of Los Angeles at this point. At one point it was far away from LA, and now Los Angeles has basically come to the doorstep of Pasadena. And you can imagine the development pressure. There are many, many bungalows, beautiful small bungalows. They are not big enough for the 21st century family. But Pasadena has worked very closely with residents to ensure that the character, the shady tree-lined character, very much like Winter Park, with the small homes, is preserved, at least from the streetscape. That's the other part of it. You can do whatever you want in the backyard. And I think Winter Park has some of that here, where you can do a lot in your backyard, but it's that streetscape feel that really is critical to maintain.
Thank you. You've mentioned Betsy Owens and her organization. Miss Owens published a new blog post, I think it was yesterday. And the title of that post is "Why Historic Preservation Needs Government. The Free Market Can't Do It All." Now, I know you've spoken to that somewhat already in the interview, but I'm wondering if I can ask you about a few points that Miss Owens made. She pointed out that the preservation standards in the city of Winter Park are unusually stringent relative to designating historic districts. I think she has said that our current ordinance, requires at least 2/3 of the homeowners in the proposed district to favor its formation. And so in our history, we have managed to have 2 districts to form, get enough votes to form 2 districts. That's the College Quarter and Virginia Heights East. But she indicated that others have fallen short because of the threshold. And she indicated that that far exceeds the requirements of other Florida cities. So apparently Winter Park is a standout along those lines. She indicated that West Palm Beach had no threshold whatsoever. And a comment by a public official there that, quote, historic preservation is just another form of zoning. Now, that point of view has been put forward in hearings and as public comments here in the city of Winter Park. I'm wondering if you'll comment on that for us, either of you.
Okay.
I think you can address it.
I agree. I think that if we think of historic preservation as analogous to zoning, that it might make more sense to the people who are in these houses. I can't buy the lot right here and build a factory on Osceola. It's the same sort of thing. The argument that, well, it restricts my rights to do what I want with my property, and it does, in fact, do that, but it's for the greater community welfare, which is what I understand a lot of the zoning rules are. I've asked a couple of people who are property rights advocates, I've said, you know, just as a hypothetical, are there any buildings in Winter Park that are sacred that you would never want demolished? And they said no. They said any building can be demolished in Winter Park, which to me was frightening. That when I drive down the street, I see history, 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 and even a newer building can contribute to that history. But if you start pulling these teeth out one by one by one, there's just going to be, there will be nothing left. And this happens by generations. So we had a generation that's aging now that very much enjoyed their houses and appreciated them, and they need to move out. The new generation is going in. And it is possible that you could lose all of the historic buildings on Interlochen in one generation if we're not careful with that.
Beyond that, there's an effort now being taken at the Historic Preservation Board at the city. They've been charged by the administration with rewriting the city's historic preservation ordinance. So the members of that board have been charged with doing that. And apparently the extent of community input or input from those who are not members of the board is limited primarily to email and commentary during the public comment section of the hearings. So therefore, the qualifications and the interests of the board members become that much more important in the process. In her blog, Ms. Owens talked about needing serious qualifications for any historic preservation board. And she pointed out that language from other boards included quote, "All members shall have demonstrated a special interest, experience, or knowledge in historic preservation or related disciplines." And she goes on to talk about actual specifics regarding professional qualifications. She contrasted that with what Winter Park's current ordinance specifies about board member qualifications, which is that board members must simply be City of Winter Park residents, one of which on the board would be an architect. Could you comment on whether the practice in other cities that you're familiar with, and whether and if you feel that possibly that definition of qualifications might be enhanced?
Right, I think that the formula should be reversed entirely, as Betsy suggests, as Ms. Owens suggests, which is that most people should have architectural qualifications, and then one person on the board represents the regular citizen. If you have an advisory board for, a business development meeting, and you populate that with nobody who understands business, I'm not sure how the board can be effective in implementing any kind of strategic motion to make progress. I think understanding architecture, it's for architectural historians, it takes about 20 years to be a good architectural historian. It takes 20 years to be a great architect. So people really invest a good deal of their intellectual development in this, and to keep that kind of capital off of the board doesn't make any sense to me.
I think the most important thing I would like to add is we are truly facing a move it or lose it situation, and it's imminent now. And we certainly hope that our citizens in Winter Park and our businesses will help us reach the goals needed to get it across the lake, and do so soon.
Right, it's absolutely imperative that people act immediately, right now, or the house will be lost.
Right now, the project is in a fairly precarious situation because the fact we need to be making the deposits to the moving company and the various subcontractors. I believe there's 13 in total, in order to ensure that we can begin no later than November 1. However, we can't jeopardize donors' money by paying out large deposits without assurance that we have enough money in the bank to go ahead and proceed. So that's the next 30 days are vitally important in making or breaking this effort.